For our first speaker is Professor Balram Singh. Professor Balram Singh is a professor and president at Institute of Advanced Sciences, Dartmouth, USA. And as I said in morning, apart from that, he was a moving spirit behind the discourses that go on in USA on Vedic wisdom, Indian spirituality, culture. And that way, as I said in the morning, there is a very vibrant group in USA which seek to promote this Indian culture, Indian mode of thinking. So that's a very great thing, great service. Apart from a biologist, a very renowned biologist who has several patents in his name, who even at present is engaged seriously in innovative research. Simultaneously, he has been seriously engaged in the pursuit of, academic or spirituality in many dimensions, as an academician, as a practitioner, like that. Therefore, it is fortunate in having him with us, and I request Professor Balram Singh to make his presentation, and we will have a few questions after his presentation. We will have that question answer too, because then only it will be our discussions will be worthwhile. So, Professor Balram Singh, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Govinath. I hope you won't mind me using slides. Is that okay to use slides?
Yeah.
Okay. And you can see my slides? You can see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. One of the weaknesses of being in science is that we always have to have something to talk about. And since we believe more in material world, so I have to have some slides, unlike Professor Bhatt and others who can really talk for forever without looking at anything. We have our little bit of a weakness, so I hope you don't mind that. Thank you for this opportunity. This is a great subject, and I find myself to be very privileged to be able to listen to the morning session, although it was late in night, but more importantly, be able to say something, a few words of my thoughts. So with that basic introduction, I wanted to talk about, with the topic, my topic is mutual influence of yoga and dharma and their dependence on karma. It's a little bit different than what I have heard in the morning, but quite related. The fact that, yoga, dharma has something to do with yoga. During that particular yoga, I think a particular dharma should be followed that was emphasized in the morning. And what I'm trying to, accomplish, and people can go to sleep if they understand or at least believe my statement, that actually is not only that yoga that defines dharma, but also the other way around. It's a dharma that also defines yoga. And that all necessarily depends on the karma, what we do. That's very, very important. And that's the point I'm going to try to make. So, of course, there is an origin of universe. And that universe has been, physics people have been telling for how long it has been and how it has evolved. Somewhere ranges between 11.4 billion years to 20 billion years. The interesting thing is that from physics point of view, it's the arrow of time. Everything is expanding entropically, which is the thermodynamic concept. Everything is going to be more random and more random, and more things will appear, more diversity will appear, more chaos will appear. And that's the understanding that currently physics in a more prevalent way it has. There is a theory in Princeton University there are some physicists who believe there is oscillation of the nature of there is an oscillation in the nature of the universe, and the universe is oscillating, which is a concept maybe similar to what we might call a yuga cycle or a yuga chakra. And that, so there is a concept one has to try to come up with some kind of an understanding and wrap around as to what this really yuga thing causes, what it might be happening. One of the things that happens is the precession of the earth. The earth goes around its own center 24 hours, and then it goes around the sun for 1 year. But then there is this 23.5 degree inclination. That inclination also precesses, and that takes time. And that takes time approximately 25,000 years. So it takes approximately 25,000 years. And that is one of the thing that physically happens if we want to think about something. And since nature has so much influence, we are not different from nature, according to Vedic tradition, according to Hindu tradition. So we, yat pinde tat brahmande, and Vyasti and Samasti are always together. So this may actually have some bearing on our concept or behavior or understanding or value of what we call as yuga. And since there is a huge difference in at least one aspect that is so important for life, that is the solar energy. The solar energy has an influence on the earth. Which part of the earth gets more or less solar energy has an influence on the climate and the people's behavior, and which might be related to dharma, because dharma is basically a concept of what is one's nature, and nature is defined by the nature around us. So that might be actually the thing that happens. For India, actually, is very peculiar, because India, for last what we know as the Indian subcontinent, for the last 10 million years ago, last 10 million years or so, it has been actually part of Asian subcontinent, and the Himalayas has been coming up because of its geography, and that has an influence within this 24,000 year cycle. And this one of the thing that happens with this 24,000 year cycle is that something physically happens. For example, what happens to carbon dioxide or what happens to temperature. There is a major changes every 125,000 years ago, or so, and there are minor changes which may be reflecting to this 24,000 or 25,000 years. You can see that approximately 3-4 cycles within 125,000 years, which may be related to this precession of the cycle. And then when you have 4 cycle or so, then you have bigger cycle. And this is something that happens naturally. And since it happens naturally, and the Hindu or Vedic traditions have always learned and interacted with nature, so that may be actually the scientific, physical, material understanding of what might be causing the yuga or change in the yuga. Now, there are other aspects within the physics that the Big Bang, people think of the Big Bang theory, that they say that there is a concept of quantum, somehow there is a pre-existing state, and that just appears and disappears, what we might call as a Big Bang or whatever. But this is very important. This is only interesting or valid only if we think about time and space. And there is so much discussion, I wouldn't have time to go into today, but there is so much discussion about time and space in Indian philosophy. It is particularly the philosophy of Vaisesika. And that really makes whatever we are, whatever we think, whatever we do, and whatever is our even previous existence is really defined by time and space. So I wouldn't go into detail, but that is very relevant in terms of what appears and disappears. Now, people have thought about this time, and there are great scientists, including Francis Crick, who got Nobel Prize in Chemistry for DNA. He wrote a book, actually, Astonishing Hypothesis, The Scientific Search for Soul. He wrote a book in which I just took this paragraph. Most of the religious beliefs we have today originated in a time when the earth, while a small place by our standards, was then thought of being a very large. We are talking about when people used to say earth-centric, especially the Roman Catholics or Roman rulers, and particularly it was related to the Christian concept. Even thought its exact extent was unknown. It was not impossible to believe that Earth was less than 10,000 years old. The stars seemed far away, fixed perhaps in the spherical firmament, which is also very important concept of Christianity. But that the universe extended as far as it does, more than 10 billion light years, was almost inconceivable. Now he writes an exception has to be made here for certain Eastern religions, such as Hinduism, that takes, he basically derides, but he said that take pleasure in inflating times and distances for a sheer joy of it, not perhaps realizing that there may be some truth to it, and especially if he understood some of the concept, then he would be more appreciative. Now, interesting thing is that the Indian concept does have this yuga cycle, and this has the concept of 24,000 years, and the years can be calculated a little bit differently in Indian tradition versus what Gregorian calendar is. So this is approximately the number that you have, about 25,000 years, some physical phenomenon that happens, and that may have a scientific basis of it, where yuga, in one meaning of yuga, is a pair. So you have a descending yugas and you have ascending yugas. You see the concept that I took from Tesargiri, who was the guru of Swami Paramhans Yogatmana. So this is the concept of yuga that is coming. Now, the time of whatever the time is, I told you the time and space is very important. Now, Einstein did an experiment about time. And in this experiment, he published in Journal of Exothermic Science, where he's trying to explain the theory of relativity, because, everything is relative to something. And he talks about when a man sits with a pretty girl for an hour, it seems like a minute. But let him sit on a hot stove for a minute, and it's longer than any hour. Of course, he's talking about from the Western culture point of view. But the thing is that this could also be applied to a sage or saint who gets in trance, and time goes on and doesn't even matter. So it's the same idea. This is just more normal, a regular person can understand. So, but then the concept of time is what happens when nothing else happens. There is Richard Feynman says that time is what happens when nothing else happens. On the other hand, Julian Barber says time is nothing but change. So both of them are contradictory, and hopefully in the Indian concept, especially when we're talking about meditation and yoga and other things, that really resolves these issues, because it's only question of perspective. But two colleagues from in my Institute of Advanced Sciences, Nilesh Oak and Rupa Bhatti, they have done this calculation, quite a bit of calculation based on astronomy. And again, I wouldn't go into detail. I just want to try to impress all of you that there is a way to calculate these numbers, and these numbers are huge. We are talking about something Yamuna and Saraswati split 50,000 BCE. So we are talking about now not 4,000, 5,000, 10,000. We are at least talking about tens of thousands. And that is all based on astronomical things. Not everybody accepts this. There are people who question it. And, this is just nature of scholarship. I think eventually it'll figure it out. But this Nilesh Oak as well as Rupa Bhatti, both of them are faculty at the Institute, and they are really working very hard. They have come up with several books. Again, the idea is we are still only talking about time. So now I want to bring this whole idea to the concept of dharma, or at least the concepts that we have in dharma, and how we can maybe understand, how we can grapple with this issue. So my group has come up with a model a while ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, where and I did present this in one of the Sunya conference that Professor Bhatt was organized, I think, in 2016, where the one which is all knowledgeable is represented at this circle, and those who are ignorant are at the margin. The farther away you are from the knowledge, the longer it will take you to get there. For a person who is fully knowledgeable, moving from one point to another point is nothing. But for somebody who is ignorant, it takes very, very long time. And then this R defines how far you are from ignorance. So this is just only question of now mind and consciousness, Chetana and Man. So if you have highly evolved people like sages, we have that includes the founder of this organization, Santigiri. They have very different kind of understanding. It's very difficult for an ordinary person to understand. But the point is that the whole idea of this world is to have that opportunity to explain to everybody how that is done. It can be that one can treat this mathematically. I wouldn't go into detail. Just only trying to say that this whole calculation can be treated mathematically and can be presented to people for verification or testing. And we have done this idea and calculated what we have named as consciousness coefficient. And this consciousness coefficient can be calculated based on the relationship between speed of light and temperature. And then for an unevolved human being, which is not elevated at all, total base, just the material science would have a consciousness coefficient of 5.054 times 10 to the power 17. Now, this can be tested for individuals, and my group is designing some experiments to test it so that we can demonstrate to people that this has a value just like any other constant that we have today, whether it is a gravitational constant or universal gas constant or a variety of constants, Coulombic constants. So then we will be able to make progress and then bring that high level of understanding and consciousness to the level of where an individual might be, and that will provide a pathway. And that concept can be explained both physically and mentally in terms of time dilation. I wouldn't again go into details of it, but because most of you are probably very familiar with this. What I want to, in the last few minutes that I have, is the karma. So this is all yuga, and maybe it is Chaitanya and Chitta and Man is the concept that is always available in the dharmic traditions or Hindu traditions. But the concept of karma. Now Jains have a very great idea about this karma. They think that karma is the cause of bondage, and its cessation leads to liberation. Okay, so that's a concept. Is basically a little bit different. Karma is you get the karma phala, but here it is that you really want to get rid of the karma, which is also kind of similar to Vedic concept. But the interesting aspect of this is origin of manifested mind and matter begins with nothing, and the karma's minutest form is vibration or periodic motion. So you can see that motion I was just talking about, there is a periodicity, and that can be reasonably explained by this hypothesis. Now, Swami Vivekananda talked about karma yoga. The action one has done cannot be destroyed until it has borne its fruit. No power in nature can stop it from yielding its results. If I do an evil action, I must suffer for it. There is no power in this universe to stop or expose. Basically, what we are is what our karma is. Our karma is what we are in a very normal way. And then the moment you realize this, understand this, then you get into the karma yoga. Now, the concept of one of the karma yoga and the connection with the religion, this nivritti is the fundamental basis. When you really understand that, and then we